So, on this episode, we're going to talk about spiritual but not religious because of the challenges we're having in the local church with young people. My guest, John, has worked in the youth ministry and has a ton of experience. So, I'm interested to know what his thoughts are on being spiritual but not religious. Is that even a thing? I want us to talk about the traditional institutional religion. Why are people turning away from the traditional setting to the self?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Martin. I think we're all looking for meaning and purpose. And I think the institution of the church, we could say that we've dropped the ball in many ways because young people are looking to different things for meaning and purpose and significance. And sometimes I think maybe wouldn't even term it in that way. I think they would maybe even be a part of a local church. But when it comes to the reality of actually getting meaning or significance, they're going other places like online communities and, their whatever, group online or social group that they're a part of, or maybe even identities that they find in, what they wear or the types of groups, people they hang out with, or what they watched, entertainment, different things like that. And so, I think it's really interesting that people, I think, are distracted from the deeper significance of what the church has to offer for the deepest parts of what God created us to be able to have meaning and purpose.
So these people are living the traditional church setup. They're still spiritual, but they're finding meaning elsewhere. And now they are remixing. Let's talk about this remixing. What does that mean, and what goes on in there? What are they remixing?
I think they're remixing because religion, they don't see it as their reality, ironically. It's just they maybe see it as pretentious, And I think a lot of it goes to just our culture and being consumers. And one of the things that we consume the most is entertainment. And so we're distracted by entertainment and we're not even knowing that we're looking for meaning and purpose, significance. But it kind of comes to us as all of a sudden we're watching a show, a Marvel show or Harry Potter, just to name a couple of famous, popular ones. And all of a sudden they say, oh, wow, they get, without even realizing it, they get really embedded into it because they realize they're connected to the story of someone having meaning and significance in their life. And maybe they haven't found that within Christianity, to the point where the church is actually living out its meaning and purpose. I think it goes back to our understanding of what the gospel is and knowing the purpose that we have through Christ, being matched up with his identity, his death and resurrection, being matched up with him, and then being matched up with his purpose. Our purpose is no longer our own purpose to find and discover our true inner selves. Really, our purpose is to be matched up with what Jesus's purpose was now, and to do that within a community of believers. And so it's really interesting. I think, young people are being lured away thinking that the answers are elsewhere, but there really can be found, I think, most adequately within the church context.
So when a person is remixing religion, what does that look like? I feel like we're in a religious buffet where I can get a little bit of this in the church, a little bit of that on social media, a little bit of that when I gather with my friends. In real life, what examples can you give that shows a person is remixing in terms of content?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think some of it has just been cheapened, where we're just, because we think of religion as in going to church, and we don't think as religion of these practical things that we do to get meaning or significance or have rituals that build this community. I think a couple examples, one that I was really faced with when I first came to Liberty to be a resident director is everyone was talking about the Enneagram, which has pagan roots, but
Sure.
everyone's okay, what's my personality? And that gives me meaning, and that gives me value, and that gives me excuses with the negative things of my personality, and so they kind of mix that into, well, I'm going to redeem this secular thing and make it Christian, and then kind of mix it together. Another one is, it's interesting, like there's a group of young people at Liberty, and they're going to have like a yoga event where they were going to kind of have a time of rest, spiritual rest and rejuvenation, and be able to, take care of themselves by doing yoga. And I told my Indian friend about this, and he was just flabbergasted because he said, do you know what yoga is? It's, like you're worshiping these, these different deities. And, they just saw it as innocent of, hey, I'm going to combine these things and it almost redeem it, and maybe not knowing the religious significance to some of these things. Another one that's really interesting, Martin, is kind of in the culture here where I am, is the idea of Sabbath. And Sabbath is kind of like this real, popular concept right now, where like in the church, we haven't, in institutional church, maybe in the denominations that many are a part of, they haven't done Sabbath, and they realized it's a Christian concept. And so then they're combining it with self-care and help, and redefining what Sabbath is based upon how they understand rest in society. And so they kind of mix it together. Like, well, I'm going to do Sabbath because I need me time, versus, hey, at the Sabbath, I'm doing Sabbath because I'm being dependent and resting on the Lord and the hope that I have in Him in eternity. This is a spiritual excuse to focus on me, and it can become narcissistic.
That's right.
If we're not careful, where we're just focusing on our individuality. And I think a lot of it is we're focused so much on our individuality, what we need, versus much of religion. Etymology of religion is really goes back to the concept of duty to God, being created by God, and to worship Him. And then because of that, a duty in how we represent Him to other people. And really, it's some of the remixing, I think, goes back to how we're internalized, where the spirituality is just about us and nothing else.
That's a kind of religious fluidity. I mean, we're so
Yeah.
fluid. And I like the examples you gave, because yoga is big. And we've been so influenced by the Eastern religion that a young person can go to church after they've done meditation, yoga, or Enneagram, zodiac signs. People they call themselves Sagittarius, Leo, all these things, Virgo, and then they'll come to church and they don't see anything wrong with these things. There's no boundary. All the boundaries are blurred. And
Yeah.
they believe in God, they'll go to church, but they'll do these things. And so they are remixing. What a generation that remixes.
Yeah.
Having a
and then it's
form of
valid.
godliness and denying its power and looking at something else. I think you were going to make a comment there.
I was just going to say, often it's these things, these different examples, they're minimized and then validated by, well, other Christians are doing it, and so it's not that big of a deal because it's just within the culture. So, a little of this, a little bit of that, as long as I still worship the Lord on Sunday, or it may be within my small group, it doesn't matter that I'm, doing these other things. Without realizing that our Christianity is holistic into our whole beings. Everything we do is a reflection of what we think about God, and everything that we do is a reflection of what we value and prioritize, and what's going to bring us meaning and significance. It's really interesting.
So when we're not in the traditional church setup, right, we've left the church, but we're still spiritual. And there's some sort of privatization of God going on in our lives. or maybe we're online joining some groups. We're seeking meaning, we're seeking significance. We want to feel that we belong. Now, when
Mm.
we do these things, young people are pursuing a cause, right? They always live for a cause. So if they're in the local church and there's nothing going on there really, they rather jump online and join some community that there's something going on that they will live for. What do you have to say about young people following the cause and finding that in other places outside the church?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember having some conversation with some college students. This was pre-COVID, and they were confused. Why do I need to even go to church when I'm having community and being effective as a Christian outside of church, with my friends or maybe the people that I live in the dorm with in the university setting? There's no need for me to go to church. I could just watch online and it'd be the exact same experience, and it really was grieving for me because I think they kind of misunderstood the purpose of being in community together and working together as a church to have a purpose to go and be an impact for the kingdom as a group, with those that they're growing in the relationship with the Lord with beside, and holding one another accountable and confronting and being confronted, by those in the church that you're deepening relationships with. So, I think, with the generation of Generation Z is what they call them, after millennials, it's interesting because the studies show that they, more than anyone else, understand the concept of needing to make an impact in the world. And so young people are trying to do that however they can, and they're trying to create it apart from, maybe how those who are in authority, if you will, have done it in the past. They're trying to recreate it through the internet and their peers and their own social environments.
So let's talk about online communities because that's where they are now. A lot of young people are online, social media. Some of them are doing good. Some of them are also following blindly in search of meaning and purpose. Digital
Mm-hmm.
tribes. How does
Yeah.
that affect morality and creation of meaning and search of significance and happiness, if you would?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about it is when you're online, you can tailor whatever community you want, you know. So you can go as niche as you want within people that have similar interest, and be involved in online communities across the globe. And if you don't like it, then you can just exit out, you know. But when I was dealing with high school students, particularly, it was fascinating because online became more of a reality than in person, and there was a lot of online bullying
Mm.
that these young people do, which becomes even more devastating for them because that's where they're getting all their significance and meaning is from being validated on these online communities, the people that have similar interests or values or a similar age. And so when there's bullying, which usually there's harsher bullying online because it's cheaper, it's easier to do,
Mm-hmm.
than face to face. Then it becomes even more devastating for these young people. And then because of that, they're trying to maybe rise to this standard of what's expected of them in these online groups. And because of that, there's a lot of people that I've dealt with young people that are dealing with high levels of anxiety. Like anxiety is just rising and rising and rising. And I think the reason for that is because young people are finding their communities online, and that's not reality. It's just people present whoever they want to be, their best selves, or it can become messy. So yeah.
So, because human beings innately we have a sense of belongingness. I mean, we want to belong. We're searching for meaning. When you're part of a group, when these young people go online and they get these validations, affirmations, they put a picture online. Somebody likes it. whether they're nude or not, somebody's liking it, they're getting these affirmations. Doesn't that become a form of a sect or religion or a group? Not in a narrowest sense, but at least, if you're in the church, you have compliment, you have support, you have affirmation. It's a group where you feel like I'm part of this, I'm part of this community. But when you go online, you get the same thing too. So they wouldn't come to church, but they'll go online because when they put photos up and other things, the same sense of community is there. People are affirming them, people are validating them, and they feel good about it. And they rather go there than come to
Yeah.
church. How is that distorting the reality of young people?
Well, it's addictive. Most young people are addicted to social media. And I think it's because their new purpose for their lives is getting likes, and being accepted, and within their online community from, their picture or their comment, or, if someone doesn't like their comment or like their picture, then they feel like they're insignificant. So their new drive is to get those things, and it's not based necessarily in reality. And within that, people, I think, then they see these people who are posting things and they idealize them, like, oh wow, I wish I was having that experience that this person was having. And then they have what we call FOMO, fear of missing out. And I think that creates this angst. And then, they can put a picture of, wow, look, I'm having purpose or meaning or significance. And then it becomes this comparison game where everything is self-centric, based upon what they view other people doing, which I think is very natural, to the human condition. But it's exasperated within the online community, and how you get to tailor it and shape it to what you want to present and set forward and respond to.
Among the young people, so now it used to be that once in a while you get the form, you fill in the form, and the form asks your, religious affiliation. Now people are saying that I'm none of the above, unaffiliated. Who are these
Yeah.
people?
Oh, that's fascinating, Martin. Martin, it can be anybody, but I think often, in my limited experience and understanding, it would be people that maybe have an upbringing within a specific church setting, where they don't want to be penned as belonging to an institution or church or denomination, because then someone will be able to pin them in a corner, and they want to be able to say, no, I'm my own self, and I'm this eclectic, combination of all these different things, and you need to value me for who I am, because I don't want to be pinned as my authority is something outside of myself. I want people to know that, my authority is from within, because I know that's what other people respect. People will respect me if I'm making my own autonomous decisions versus, oh, you're just following like a pawn, these because that's how you grew up, or that's, you're being oppressed. It goes back to Rousseau, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're being oppressed by these other institutions or churches, or religions. And if I say, well, I only take the good from that, and I'll figure out something else for myself, then that's respected within the young people and their own communities. Is really
But
fascinating.
aren't the implication, if we look towards the self, right, we turn inward and we're looking at
Yeah.
ourselves, what are the implications for the community? Because I don't think that self,
Mm-hmm.
you're not yourself if you're not within a group of people. What I'm saying is that being part of a group helps to define who you are or determine who you are. Your interactions with your family, friends, loved ones rub on you and help you to determine who you really are. Now, when we look within, and so forget about structures, society, it's oppression, it's oppressive. I just want to be me, that kind of stuff. What are the implications? Will we have on society?
Yeah. Well, I would say it negatively impacts relationships, which I would say God created us to have, because He's a relational God. And this is something, Martin, I actually see impacting marriage and the family as a whole. And as I counsel young people and see, their parents, maybe their marriage has fallen apart, or their understanding of what a romantic relationship should be, it's all focused on what they can get out of it versus a sense of duty and sacrifice to benefit the other person. That's really what relationships are meant to be. Function well is to be selfless, not just what I can get out of it. That's, what I would call lustful, not in a non-sexual way, just as far as I'm going to use this relationship to see what I can get out of it myself. And as soon as, say, within a marriage relationship, I'm not getting what I got signed up for anymore, then I'm going to have a divorce, and I'm going to move on because it's not suiting my needs or my meaning or my significance or my happiness, And so I think when you turn within, it ruins relationships as a whole. But I think the biggest one that impacts society is marriages and therefore families.
That's interesting because it used to be a long time ago that we find purpose in community. I mean, the community is bigger than us, so people will lay their lives down to defend the group, or because the group is bigger. But now we're saying we're bigger than the group. It's about me. Forget about the group. It's all about soul care now. So now you have. Let's talk about soul care or self-care.
Okay.
You have people going to this wellness. Now the wellness industry is huge, right? And people will go there and they have these leaders helping them to lose their weight, and they now have influence directly over their lives, helping them to create meaning, telling them what is right, what is wrong, versus a traditional religious setting where you would have a pastor who would shepherd a flock. But now when you go to the gym or some fitness group or maybe CrossFit or other things, they have some of these leaders who are now spiritual guides helping you because it's all about you. And then during these trainings, they're telling you, as long as it makes you feel good, you're doing good, you can make it, that kind of stuff, just to boost the self. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I could say a lot about it, Martin. I think, there's an element to where people know that are selling things know that we need purpose and meaning to get connected to it, right? And so, I think there's a certain level of branding that takes advantage of this concept because they know that people are created to have meaning and purpose, and that's what they long for. That's what they're searching for. That's what they're trying to find. And so you're not going to have a successful business if you don't tap into that somehow, right? And if you don't tap into, hey, I'm a part of this community because I buy this product. And I think like the self-care aspect goes to the heights of that. It's like the best example of it. Because then you're caring for your whole self, if you will, mind, body, and soul. And I think that maybe young people don't understand how Christianity is doing that, right? Their response to the gospel doesn't impact their mind, body, and soul in their experience. And so they're going to something else to get that. I think that's the root ultimately of what's going on. Yeah. I could say a lot more about it.
So are you saying in our pursuit of self-care, those who are offering us these services are also making money off of us? Because they know, we want to feel good. And so we'll come to them. We'll go to this tribe, this community, this online service. And when we're doing that, what they're offering us, because it's making us feel good, they're also making money in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, they're really latching into our very humanity. That, as Augustine said, we basically the idea that we're not going to be content until we realize that all of our desires are to be found in the Lord, So, yeah, I think the self and the trouble with the self-care, I think, is a lot of times it goes into the remixing, similar to what I was talking earlier, where they say, well, this is good for me. I'm supposed to be a good steward of my body. but I'm going to do it in a way that's, like through yoga or something. But how they advertise it is, hey, this is going to be transformative for you. You're going to have better purpose and meaning and significance, better community, that you're going to be like improving. And God has created us to improve, because we're in a broken world. Everyone knows that we're in a broken world that needs to be fixed, and we're in broken bodies that need to be fixed. And so self-care is like, hey, I'm going to give you a solution to this, to help with the redemptive process of redeeming your body, of redeeming, your broken relationships. And it becomes a religion that these people participate in. Yeah.
So do we have to do something because it makes us feel good? It's all about
Oh,
self-care.
we have, like, as in whatever we feel, we have to obey that.
Yeah, because
urge?
it's
Is that what you're
it's
saying?
the self, and I'm caring for myself. So if it makes me feel good, why not?
Right. Because our self is the authority now. So I'm gonna follow whatever my self wants to do. I'm doing it all for me. I'm gonna do it for me and nobody else. And so it turns almost narcissistic, because the only reason why you're doing it, you're becoming a consumer of even community, of how you're benefited from it. Not a purpose of, I'm created to help other people.
If you do it for yourself and I do it for myself, what are the challenges we can face, when we look within, separate from each other? I'm trying to satisfy me. You're trying to satisfy you, because there are no standards now. I have my own standards. You have your own standards. What challenges can we have in our community?
Well, I think there's a couple things. The first one that I think of, Martin, is that there's no real accountability. Because who are you to say that was wrong or right for me if my inner self is the only authority? You can't challenge it, So, even if people within the community are saying, oh, that's out of the bounds of, this cycling community, well, then you just create a new one or a different one. People even do that with churches. Oh, I'll just create a new church, But I think the second thing, to answer your question there, is that people are never going to be satisfied. They're going to be discontented. They're searching for, to have this understanding, to feel belonging, which is ironic, right? Because they're trying to feel belonging by having a community and do it on their own terms.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never going to fully work. They're going to be discontented, and their meaning is going to shift and continue to change as they look to different things to fill the void within themselves. So they're never going to arrive at the conclusion by trying to just focus on themselves through outward means, if you will.
So what is it about the human condition that makes it impossible for us to get satisfied looking within than, having a sense of a divine awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe we were ever created to look within. I think that was the fall of, Adam and Eve. When they thought that they were missing out on something, God was holding something from them, and so they looked at themselves and said, oh, there's something that I don't have that I need to get. When they realized they already had everything that they could have. They were as close to deity as they ever could have been.
Exactly.
Before they gave in to the lie of God's trying to prevent me from being like deity. And because it's an extension of God himself is where we receive those things. And it's amazing that we have a redemptive God that is still trying to pull us back to his original design for that, within a relationship with him specifically. Where we have the most freedom is actually when we choose to let go of our freedoms and to be obedient and submissive to the Lord, and realizing that's ultimately what's best for us and is going to give us significance and meaning and purpose and belonging, etc.
Our search for meaning and purpose and belongingness has brought, in our generation now, what we call fandom. Being a fan of this, being a fan of that, want to fit in. Now, being a fanatic or being, fandom itself is affecting how we create meaning, Can we talk a little bit about that? How is fandom affecting our reality and how we create meaning?
Yeah, I think part of it goes back to the power of stories, is how we connect with different characters and we relate to them. And so we become fans of these different characters within entertainment and then become fans of it because we're trying to escape the broken reality to have a higher level of, it's a form of escapism, I think, fandom is. Because you're escaping the reality of your broken and messed up identity, and you're trying to place it within, these heroes, which we know the ultimate solution to is being a fan of Christ, right?
That's right.
He's our ultimate hero. And so, I mean, it's very normal for humans to try to become fan and then create community around that of, wow, this is really intriguing. And, this is really cool. And other people think that, this is as well. And I think of, it's perpetuated because it's validated. Fandom is valid, like your desires that you have to latch onto these stories and these characters is validated by other people doing the same thing because they're humans too. So, okay, it's okay if I put my whole life and energy and time into studying and reevaluating these characters or these stories or this show. I'm going to binge this Netflix show and I'm going to dive deep into it because I'm searching for meaning. And then it's validated by the community that's doing the same thing. It's okay, this is okay. I'm going to binge a show, but it's okay because other people are doing it as well.
One thing that fascinates me is I've heard, fans coming together and saying that, we've read this book, we've watched this movie, we like this character, but we don't like the way the owner of the movie, where he's going with the character. So we're going to determine where the character ultimately has to behave. Or we read the book, there's a certain character in the book. We don't like how the author is going with the character. We're falling so much in love with this character. We are not going to we now decide what the author does. When an author is the one that controls meaning, okay, or the one
Right.
who came up with the movie is the one that controls the meaning. Now, the fans are saying that, no, we create meaning.
Yeah.
Have you had experiences like that, and what can you share?
Yeah, I think the same thing happens of us rejecting God is people rejecting the author, because we're thinking so much about ourselves and how we're receiving it that we create our own realities. And that's one of the reasons I saw a lot of young guys on the dormitories, they're addicted to video games. And they spend more time on their video games often than they do studying. And I think one of the reasons why is because it's a form of control. I have impact on what happens with this character. And I think the same thing happens in fandom, where they say, well, I don't like the outcome of that because it challenges maybe my worldview or how I wanted things to the outcome to happen. And part of it is they're escaping reality of, part of the hardship of a broken world is you don't have control over the negative things often that happen to you. And so it's a denial of that within these online communities.
Let's bring fandom to Christianity. If I'm supposed to be a follower of Jesus, a fan of Jesus, now in the real world, I can create meaning. I can decide the outcome of the book or the movie. But if I'm a fan of Jesus, I couldn't manipulate him. I couldn't decide the outcome. What does it mean to be a true follower of Jesus?
Yeah, Martin, that's good. I would say it means surrender. Surrendering your rights to try to create yourself and find meaning yourself, and realizing that the meaning, the best meaning, most significant meaning we have, Christ is seeking to offer us in himself. And the way to receive that is surrendering your own version of that and it's a death.
Mm.
The best way to receive life is the paradox of the kingdom, is to
So
die.
die.
and that's really the trick of Christianity. And I would say more than just the moment of salvation, but every day, right? We're to pick up our cross and follow him, realizing that there's nothing else, nowhere else I could go to ultimately get, meaning. Some of these things aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves, but they are and are deceptive. These things, when we think that they're going to give us meaning and significance, or bring on added, it's like supplemental into our meaning. Oh yeah, I know that Jesus gives me meaning, but I'm going to go to these other things, and these become my reality. Well, the hope and prayer that I have for Christianity young people today is that they'll realize that Jesus is the most significant, true reality that they can experience, to have meaning and purpose, to receive his love and his meaning and his identity, and then to seek to live out the purpose that he gives them through that and from that.
Wonderful. My final question to you will be about, religious remixing seem to blur all the boundaries we once had. So there's no boundary. You can keep remixing, and keep going. With Christianity and following Jesus, there are boundaries. There are limits. What are some of the limits and boundaries for Christians and believers? Where we can go as far to a certain point. Where do we stop? Where do we say, here, I can go here, but I can't do this. This is where my limit is. Why? Because I'm a follower of Jesus. I cannot do as the world does. I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. Where are the boundaries and the limits?
That's a really good question, Martin. I think it's similar to a lot of times, we have rules at the university I'm at here, and students are always trying to figure out where are the limits of how far I can go, with this rule, or how far can I go, with my significant other before we're married. And I think it's the wrong question. I think the right question is, how close should I be getting to the Lord versus what's the limit of how far away I can get? And I think if we seek him, we'll find him. And we're distracted by so many other different things that we are seeking. We don't even realize it. And I think we're distracted. And, one of the things that I encourage young people to do sometimes is to get rid of social media, because sometimes they're addicted to it. I said, just try it for a month and just, I don't have time for the Lord. I don't have time for these different things to invest my relationship with the Lord. Well, let me see how much time you put on social media. Like, oh, you did 8 hours this week, but you can't just spend time with the Lord. I think we're distracted.
That's right.
And so one of the things is seek the Lord. And, I think of Colossians 3, where our vision is supposed to be on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father, because he's our authority. Him being at the right hand of the Father signifies that he's our authority. It doesn't mean that we escape the reality of what's going on here in our broken world, but we have a hope that he's going to rescue us from that one day. And that's where our vision is, to help us through it in the meantime, to help deal with reality and not just escape it. But yeah, I think it goes back to how close can I grow in my relationship with the Lord and be tied up with his purpose, and finding that and understanding more the depths of God's love for me and seeking to be transformed more into his image, than how close I can try to become remixed into trying to have my cake and eat it too, with the joys of the secular context of trying to gain significance and meaning by a fear of man and what other people think, versus just belonging and resting in the Lord.
Hey, Jon, thank you for coming. It's been a joy and a pleasure. With all the experience you've had working with young people, young adults, and the impact that you've made in their lives, I'm going to make a few statements and I'll give you the closing comment here. For those of us watching us, the enemy knows that the young people are the hope and the future of the church. And that because they will live for a cause, they are being distracted too by all kinds of things in the world. And once the enemy is able to distract them that way, then take their minds and their eyes off the things that God will have them do. So let's create spaces. Let's make room for our young people to serve in the local church. Let's guide them. Let's influence them positively so that they'll be useful, because they will be the future leaders of the church, every local church. Even the world knows the potential that young people can bring to the table. So let us not stifle them. Let's make room. Yes, they'll make mistakes, but that's why we're there. We're there to guide them and show them the way. John, with all the experience you have, some of our young people are becoming spiritual but not religious. How would you summarize it in your closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. It's been a joy to be here with you. I would say to not give into the temptation to condemn young people when we think they're missing the mark, but to have compassion for them. And I think young people are light years ahead more than we realize, you know, because they're seeking for whatever they believe in to be genuine. They're all about being genuine. And I think that's one of the keys to the Christian faith is honesty with yourself and with the Lord, right? With the Lord most importantly, and then yourself. And I think creating spaces, as you said, for young people to do that within a trusted community of seeking to understand the gospel and what that means for us practically more and more, to show them that, hey, the answers are within Christianity, within the scriptures, and that can come alive. And I think if we do that and seek to have spaces where they can be honest within community and to be transformed by the renewing of their minds through scripture, we can have a bright future. It might look different than some of the traditions that we've come from, but I think that's going to be a good thing as we move forward and seek to the one day when we'll see Jesus face to face.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for coming. Hopefully we'll have you another time on a different discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Yeah, it's been a joy.
Bye for now.